Last summer I pulled 63 pounds of tomatoes off 2 plants in one of my little 4x8 beds. The summer before that, same beds, same varieties, I got barely half that. The only thing I changed was 3 drops of one thing I started adding to my watering can. Here's the thing. Most folks dump expensive fertilizer on their tomatoes and wonder why the plants go all leaf and no fruit. After 2 decades of figuring this out, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I use those 3 drops in 4 simple steps so your plants set fruit instead of just getting bushy. And stick around to the end because there's a specific time of day I do this that doubles how well it works. Let me back that number up because I weighed every single tomato on the same digital kitchen scale I use for camera. 63 pounds off 2 plants last summer. The summer before, same 2 4x8 cedar beds I built back in 2023, same varieties, a big Cherokee purple and a paste Roma type. I got barely 31 pounds, half. Same soil, same sun, same watering can. The only thing that changed was 3 drops of liquid kelp extract, the seaweed concentrate, going into every gallon of water I poured. Here's the thing. Most folks reach for the strongest fertilizer on the shelf and pour it on thick, and then they wonder why they end up with a 5-foot jungle of leaves and a handful of tomatoes. That's the nitrogen doing exactly what nitrogen does. It tells the plant to grow leaf, leaf, and more leaf. What it doesn't do is tell the plant to set fruit. Liquid kelp is almost nitrogen-free. Instead, it's loaded with potassium and natural growth hormones, and those are the signals that push a tomato to flower and hold on to its fruit. I'm going to walk you through this in 4 simple steps. Step 1 is getting the right thing, and there's one bottle you absolutely do not want to grab by mistake. Step 2 is mixing those 3 drops correctly. Step 3 is timing it to the plant, not the calendar. And step 4 is how you actually apply it. After that, I'll run through the 3 mistakes I see people make every season. And then, like I promised, I'll tell you the specific time of day I do this, the one that doubles how well it works. Let's get into it. Step 1. Get the right thing. This is where almost everybody goes sideways before they even start, so listen close. What you want is a bottle of liquid kelp extract, sometimes labeled seaweed extract, and ideally one that says cold processed on the front. Cold processed matters because the heat-treated stuff cooks off a lot of those natural growth hormones I mentioned, and the hormones are the whole point. This is not fertilizer. I want to say that again, because it's the part people skip right past. It is not fertilizer. Liquid kelp is nearly nitrogen-free, and instead it's packed with potassium and natural plant hormones called cytokinins, which is a long word that just means the chemical signal that tells a tomato to flower and set fruit. Here's the bottle you do not want to grab by mistake. Fish emulsion, all-purpose feed. Anything with a big first number on the label, because that first number is nitrogen. I learned this the hard way. Back in 2017 and 2018, when I was first trying to graduate from regrowing scraps on my windowsill to growing something real, I killed my first 3 tomato plants in a single summer. The 4th one I kept alive, but it was a 4-foot bush of gorgeous green leaves with maybe 6 sad little tomatoes hiding in there. I'd been feeding it fish emulsion every week because I thought more food meant more fruit. All I did was tell that plant to grow leaf. So step 1 is genuinely the easy part. Walk past the fertilizer aisle. Find 1 bottle of liquid kelp. Out here it runs me about $12, and because you use so little, that 1 bottle lasts me 2 full seasons. The win here is simple. You've got the right tool in your hand, and you've already dodged the single most common mistake before you've mixed a thing. Step 2. Mix those 3 drops correctly, and I mean 3 drops. Not 3 squirts, not a glug, not a capful. 3 actual drops per gallon of water in your watering can. I fill my plastic can right up to the gallon line, I count out 3 drops, and I give it a good stir so it folds all the way through the water. That's it. That's the whole mix. Now, I know what you're thinking because I thought it too. 3 drops in a whole gallon cannot possibly do anything. It seems like nothing. But here's the thing. This isn't a feeding. You are not pouring nutrients into the soil and hoping the plant eats them. This is a hormonal nudge. Those growth hormones in kelp work in tiny, tiny amounts. They're a signal, not a meal. Think of it like a pinch of yeast in a loaf of bread. You don't dump in half the jar to get a bigger rise. A little does the whole job, and too much wrecks it. Same idea here. 3 drops per gallon is the dose that tells the plant to flower without overwhelming it. Gloria taught me this, and Gloria knows tomatoes. She's my old upstairs neighbor from my San Francisco days, a retired school teacher who's been growing food on her apartment balcony for more than 20 years. The first time I went up to see her balcony, she had tomato plants in containers heavy with fruit, basil, ginger in its 3rd year, the whole thing producing real food off a slab of concrete in the sky. And she fed those tomatoes with a few drops of seaweed in a watering can, same as I'm telling you now. When I asked her how much, she held up the little bottle, gave it the gentlest squeeze, and said, "You're seasoning soup, not filling a bucket." That line stuck with me. The failure mode here is the one I fell into myself, and it's the one almost everybody falls into. More is better. If 3 drops doubled my harvest, surely 20 drops will triple it. It does not work that way. I tried exactly that the year after I figured this out. I got greedy, dumped in way too much, and instead of more tomatoes, I got soft, floppy, overgrown plants that looked stressed and set fewer fruit than the year before. I'd push the plant back into leafy growth and put strain on the roots, which is the opposite of what I wanted. So measure it. 3 drops, 1 gallon, stir. If you can count to 3, you can do this part perfectly every single time. And that's the win. You've got a watering can full of the exact right signal, ready to go. Now let me anchor this for you with real numbers, because I don't want you taking my word as some vague promise. My 2 raised beds are built from reclaimed cedar fence boards I put together back in 2023. Each one is 4 feet by 8 feet, small on purpose, because if I can pull this off in that little space, you can do it in a couple of containers on a patio. 2 tomato plants go in those beds, a Cherokee Purple and a paste type Aroma. Last fall, I picked every tomato those 2 plants gave me, and I weighed the whole harvest on my digital kitchen scale, the same one I use for camera, right there on my back patio. 63 pounds. The summer before, same beds, same 2 varieties, same soil, I weighed 31 pounds. The only thing that changed between those 2 seasons was 3 drops of kelp in my watering can. That's not a guess. That's a number off a scale. So at this point, you've got the right bottle in hand, and you've got it mixed at the right strength. You'd think you could go pour it on right now, and that's exactly where most folks rush. They mixed it up, they're excited, they go drench every plant in the yard that same afternoon. And if you do that too early in the season, you've just wasted the whole thing. Timing is everything with this, and it has nothing to do with the calendar and everything to do with what the plant is actually doing. So before you tip that watering can, let me walk you through step 3, because this is the part that decides whether those 3 drops do anything at all. Step 3. Time it to the plant, not the calendar. Here's what I mean. Those 3 drops are a flowering nudge, and a nudge only does anything if the plant is ready to flower. So you wait. You wait until you see the first little yellow blooms open up on the plant. Not the buds. The actual open yellow flowers. The moment I see those, that's the morning I start. And then I repeat it every 7 days, right through the whole fruiting season, all the way until the plant winds down in the fall. Now the failure here is the one I fell into my very first year trying this. I was so eager I started the kelp the same week I put my transplants in the ground. The plants were 6 inches tall, no flowers anywhere, and I'm out there drenching them like it's going to do something. It didn't. I wasted half a bottle, and worse than that, I think I actually slowed the flowering down because the plant was busy doing root and leaf work, and I was poking at it with hormones it couldn't use yet. Save it. A tiny transplant doesn't need this. It needs sun, water, and time. The kelp is for the flowering plant, full stop. This is the kind of thing Gloria taught me without ever sitting me down to teach it. She'd be up on her San Francisco balcony, tomatoes in containers, and she never touched them with seaweed until they showed her flowers first. She'd say the plant tells you when it's hungry for it. You don't get to decide. You watch. After 2 decades, I still find that's the truest thing about all of this. The plant is running the schedule, and my job is to pay attention and show up on the right day. When you get this right, the win is something you can see with your own eyes inside a week or 2. Instead of those first flowers yellowing and dropping off the stem before they ever do anything, which is the heartbreak every tomato grower knows, the flowers hold. They stay on. And a little green nub starts swelling behind the petals. That's fruit set. That's the whole ball game. Once you see flowers holding instead of falling, you know the 3 drops are doing exactly what they're supposed to. Step 4. Put it where the roots are. This is a soil drench, not a leaf spray. I pour the diluted mix slowly around the base of the plant, right over the root zone, about a ½ gallon per established plant. Slow and steady, so it soaks down to the roots instead of running off the top of the soil. The roots are where this gets taken up and moved into the plant. That's the whole point. The failure mode here is one I see all the time, and it comes from good intentions. Folks figure if a little kelp is good for the plant, spraying it all over the leaves must be even better. So they fill a spray bottle and mist the whole plant down in the middle of a hot afternoon. Out here in Sacramento, where summer afternoons run past 100 degrees, that's a recipe for scorched leaves. Those droplets sit on the foliage, the sun hits them, and you get crispy brown patches on a plant you were trying to help. Keep it off the leaves in the heat. Pour it at the base into the soil where it belongs. I built these 2 cedar beds back in 2023 out of old fence boards, 4 feet by 8 feet each, and the soil in them is loose enough now after 3 years of compost that a ½ gallon poured slow just disappears straight down to the roots in under a minute. That's where you want it going. Do this right, and within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll watch more and more of those flowers turn into actual tomatoes instead of falling off. The plant stops being all show and starts being all fruit. If you're ready to turn this from one experiment into a full system, I want to point you somewhere. Everything I'm showing you today is about squeezing the most food out of a small bed, and I wrote a whole book on exactly that. It's called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol. It's $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com, and Chapter 7, Scaling Up from Windowsill to Backyard, walks through raised bed basics for small yards and succession planting, so you're harvesting continuously instead of all at once. That's the exact world these little tomato beds live in. If you're watching on your TV right now, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on screen. If you're on your phone or laptop, the link is right down in the description. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here when you get back. All right, let's keep going. Now, before you run off and try this, let me save you from the 3 mistakes I see most often, because any one of them will quietly cost you tomatoes. Mistake 1 is overdosing the kelp. The thinking goes, if 3 drops is good, then 20 drops must be amazing. It isn't. Overdo it, and you push the plant right back into soft, floppy, leafy growth, and you end up with fewer tomatoes, not more. The fix is simple. Measure exactly 3 drops per gallon. That's a hormonal nudge, and a nudge is all it takes. Mistake 2 is feeding too early, the thing I already confessed I did my first year. You put the transplants in, you're excited, and you start drenching before there's a single flower on the plant. All you've done is waste the product and delay your own fruiting. The fix is to wait for those first yellow blooms. No flowers, no kelp. It's that clean a rule. Mistake 3 is the sneaky one, and it's the one that undid me back when I was still killing tomato plants around 2017 and 2018. You're using the kelp, but you're also still dumping a separate high nitrogen fertilizer on the same plants out of habit. The nitrogen overrides everything. It shouts louder than the kelp ever can, and the plant goes right back to bushy with a noticeably smaller harvest. Once flowering starts, back off the nitrogen and let the kelp lead. You can't drive the plant toward leaves and fruit at the same time. Pick fruit. Now, I told you at the start there's a specific time of day I do this, and that it roughly doubles how well it works. Here it is. I feed the kelp drench in the early morning between 6 and 8 a.m., right around sunrise, before the day heats up. Same 3 drops, same half gallon, just done at dawn. Here's why it matters that much. A tomato plant takes up water and nutrients fastest in the cool early morning when its leaf pores first open and the plant starts drinking for the day. That's when the pipeline is wide open. And here's the part that ties it all together. Tomato flowers release and accept their pollen in that mid-morning window, just an hour or two later. So if you feed at dawn, the potassium and those natural flowering hormones from the kelp are moving up into the plant and sitting in the flowers at the exact moment those flowers are setting fruit. You've timed the delivery to land right when it counts. Feed in the evening instead, and most of that drench drains down past the roots overnight, long before the morning flowering window ever opens. The plant takes up a fraction of it. That's the whole difference. Same drops, same plant. But morning gets you roughly double the payoff because you put the nutrients in the plant right when the flowers were ready to use them. Gloria always knew this in her bones. Her rule was to water her balcony tomatoes while the city was still quiet, before the noise started, before the heat came up off the pavement. I thought it was just a habit of an early riser. Turns out she was feeding her plants at the one moment they could do the most with it. Now, before I let you go, I want to talk to the folks watching this who don't have a single raised bed, maybe no yard at all, just a balcony or a sunny step outside an apartment door. This exact 3-drop method works just as well on a tomato plant growing in a cheap 5-gallon container. And that's the whole reason I wrote Chapter 4 of my book, Container Gardening on Zero Budget. It walks you through setting up a free or nearly free 5-gallon container so you can grow real tomatoes without spending money you don't have. It's the guide I wish I'd had 10 years ago when I was killing tomato plants in my Portland apartment. The book is The 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol, $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. If you're on your TV right now, go ahead and grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time, I'll wait right here. So that's how 3 drops of liquid kelp doubled my harvest off just 2 plants. If you've been looking at this channel for a way to grow more food without spending more money, this is one of the easiest wins there is. Try it on 1 tomato plant this season, just 1, the way Gloria taught me to start small and let the plant show you. And the same 3 drops work beautifully on peppers and on container tomatoes too, so once you see it on 1 plant, branch out. Drop a comment and let me know which tomato variety you're growing this year. I read every one of them. Until next time, keep growing your own food, my friend. Last summer, I pulled just over 90 pounds of ripe tomatoes off 4 plants growing in a single raised bed. And the year before that, with the same varieties in the same bed, I barely cleared 30. The soil was the same. The seeds were the same. The sun was the same. The only thing I changed was how I watered them, and that one shift turned a frustrating, crack-filled, blossom-end-rotted mess into the best tomato harvest I had ever grown. And here is what is going to surprise you. The watering mistake that almost certainly silently destroying your tomato harvest right now is not underwatering. It is not overwatering either. It is something far more specific, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most home gardeners are watering their tomatoes every single day, a little bit at a time, and they think they are doing the right thing. They are not. They are slowly starving the plant, weakening the root system, and setting up nearly every tomato problem you can name, from cracked skins to that ugly black patch on the bottom of the fruit. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I water my tomatoes now, the simple shift that changed everything, and the specific timing, depth, and frequency that turns ordinary plants into producers. And stay with me to the end, because I am going to share a buried bottle trick I picked up from an old market gardener that delivers water directly to the deep roots while you sleep, costs almost nothing to set up, and works in any garden bed or container you have. So let me back up and tell you how I figured this out. Because I did not get here from reading a book. I got here from messing it up for nearly 15 years. For most of my gardening life, I watered my tomatoes the way my dad watered his, and the way most folks on my block still do. Every evening after dinner, I would walk out with the hose, give each plant what felt like a generous splash, and call it done. The leaves looked green. The soil on top looked dark. I figured I was being a responsible plant parent, and every single year by mid-July I had the same problems. Bottom rot on my Romas, skins splitting on my Better Boys, yellowing leaves climbing up the stems, plants that flowered like crazy in June, and then just kind of stalled out by August. I blamed the weather. I blamed the variety. I blamed the soil. I bought calcium supplements. I sprayed things. None of it really worked. Then, a few summers back, I read a piece of research out of the University of California Cooperative Extension that talked about tomato root depth and how the plant actually takes up water. And it completely reset my thinking. If you have been watering your tomatoes the way I used to, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not failing. You are doing what almost everyone does. You just have not been told the part nobody talks about. Here is the part nobody talks about. A mature tomato plant, when grown the right way, can send roots down 2 to 3 feet into the soil. That is not a houseplant. That is a deep-rooted, drought-tolerant fruiting plant that evolved in the arid valleys of South America. Its whole system is designed to hunt for water deep underground. But when you sprinkle a little water on the surface every evening, you are training the roots to stay shallow, right at the top, 2 or 3 inches, where the moisture is. And shallow roots cannot regulate water uptake the way deep roots can. They cannot pull calcium efficiently. They dry out the moment the sun hits them. And they make your plant a roller coaster, soaking wet at 6 p.m., bone dry by noon the next day. That swing, that wet, dry cycle, is the real killer. Blossom end rot is not a calcium deficiency in the soil. It is almost always a calcium delivery problem caused by inconsistent moisture. Cracked tomatoes are the same story. The fruit grows slowly during a dry stretch, then the plant gets a sudden gulp of water, and the fruit swells faster than the skin can stretch. So it splits. After 3 seasons of testing this, I can tell you, the fix is not more water. It is the right water, at the right depth, on the right rhythm. Once you understand this, every step that follows makes perfect sense. So now let me show you exactly how to do it. Here's what you need to understand before we even pick up the hose. The first thing you have to do is stop guessing about whether your tomato plant needs water. The top inch of soil tells you almost nothing. It dries out fast in the sun, even when the soil 6 inches down is perfectly moist. So the very first habit I want you to build is the finger test, but done correctly. Stick your index finger straight down into the soil, about 2 inches away from the main stem, and push it in as deep as it will go, ideally up to the second knuckle, which is roughly 3 to 4 inches. If the soil feels cool and slightly damp, like a wrung-out sponge, you do not need to water. If it feels dry and crumbly all the way down, it is time. If it feels soggy and you can squeeze water out, you have already overdone it and you need to back off for a day or two. If you garden in a container or a smaller raised bed, you can also lift the pot or the corner of the bed if it is portable. A well-watered container is heavy. A dry one feels light. After a week of doing this, you will start to read your tomatoes the way you read the weather. The conventional advice is to water on a schedule. What I have found works better is to water on a condition. The schedule is just a reminder to check, not a command to soak. Now let me show you how to actually deliver the water once your finger tells you it is time. This is where most people go wrong, and it is the single biggest shift you can make today. Stop watering a little. Start watering a lot, less often. When I water a mature tomato plant in midsummer, I am giving it somewhere between 1 and 2 gallons per plant, slowly, right at the base, every 3 to 5 days. Not a splash every night. A deep, deliberate soak twice or maybe 3 times a week. Here's why that matters. When you put down a full gallon at the base of the plant slowly, the water has time to soak down 12 to 18 inches into the soil. The deep roots get a real drink. And when the surface dries out a day or two later, the roots have to chase the moisture downward, which makes them deeper, stronger, and far more resilient. You are training the plant to be drought tough instead of drought fragile. The way I do it is simple. I use a regular garden hose with the nozzle off, set it on a slow trickle, and lay it right at the base of the plant. I let it run for about 2 to 3 minutes per plant, then move on. If you have a soaker hose or drip line, even better. Just make sure the water is going to the soil, not the leaves. Wet leaves invite fungal disease, especially early blight and septoria leaf spot, and they are some of the fastest ways to lose a tomato plant in July. Water the dirt, not the plant. And one more thing. Water in the morning if you can, ideally between 6 and 9 a.m. The soil has time to absorb it before the heat of the day, the leaves dry off quickly if any splashes up, and the plant goes into the hot afternoon fully hydrated. Evening watering is not the end of the world, but morning is the gold standard. Before we go any further, I want to take just a moment, because what I am sharing with you today is one piece of a much larger approach to growing your own food without wasting money or effort. If you have enjoyed this so far, I put together a complete guide called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol. It is a 171-page book that walks you through 31 regrowable crops you can start from kitchen scraps, a $10 starter kit guide, zero-waste kitchen strategies, and full troubleshooting support for when things go sideways. You can grab it for $17 by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or clicking the link in the description below. All right, let us keep going, because the next part is where the real harvest gets locked in. Now that you are watering deeply and on condition, the next thing I want you to do is mulch. And I mean really mulch. This is the single highest leverage move I make every spring, and it is the difference between watering twice a week and watering 5 times a week. Once your tomato plants are about a foot tall and the soil has warmed up, lay down 2 to 3 inches of organic mulch over the entire root zone. I like straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings that have dried for a few days. Keep the mulch about 2 inches away from the main stem itself so you do not trap moisture against the bark and invite stem rot. But cover everything else. What this does is genuinely remarkable. It cuts evaporation from the soil surface by as much as 70%, according to studies out of Cornell University. It keeps the root zone 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler on hot days, which is huge in zones 7 through 10, where summer soil can get punishingly hot. It suppresses weeds, and as the mulch breaks down, it feeds the soil biology that helps your tomatoes pull nutrients more efficiently. I have grown tomatoes with mulch and without it side by side, and the mulched plants needed roughly half the water and produced noticeably more fruit. It is not even close. If you are in a cooler zone, like 3 through 5, do not rush this. Wait until the soil has warmed to at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit before mulching. Otherwise, you are insulating cold soil and slowing the plant down. In warmer zones, the sooner you mulch after planting, the better. Once you have your watering rhythm down and your mulch in place, the next thing to think about is how to adjust as the season changes, because what works in early June will not work in late July. In the first 3 to 4 weeks after transplanting, your tomato plant has a small root system and cannot pull from deep soil yet. So during that early window, water more frequently but still deeply, about every 2 to 3 days, with maybe half a gallon per plant. As the plant grows and the roots stretch out, you stretch out the time between waterings. By peak summer, with a fully grown plant carrying fruit, I am usually on a 3 to 5 day cycle with 1 to 2 gallons per plant. When the temperature climbs above 90 degrees Fahrenheit for several days in a row, you might need to bump up to every 2 days, but still keep the volume high. Do not switch back to daily sips. That undoes everything. And if you get a heavy rain, skip your next scheduled watering entirely and check with the finger test before you do anything. More tomatoes are killed by gardeners watering on top of a recent rain than by any drought. As the fruit starts to ripen in late July and August, some experienced growers actually pull back slightly on water to concentrate the sugars and intensify flavor. I do this with my paste tomatoes especially. Just enough water to keep the plant from wilting, no more. The fruit comes out richer, denser, and sweeter. Just be careful not to swing too far, because that swing is what causes cracking. Steady and slightly less is the goal, not feast and famine. The final piece of the watering picture is learning to read the plant itself, because the tomato will tell you what it needs if you know what to look for. A healthy, properly watered tomato plant has firm, dark green leaves that hold themselves up nicely in the morning. A mild afternoon droop on a hot day is normal, especially over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The plant is conserving water by closing its stomata, and as long as it perks back up by evening, you do not need to do anything. What you are watching for is morning wilt. If the leaves are limp at 7 a.m., when the soil should be coolest, that is the plant telling you it ran out of water overnight. Time to soak it deeply. On the other side, if you see lower leaves yellowing from the bottom up while the soil stays consistently wet, that is overwatering, and you need to back off and let things dry out for 2 or 3 days. Curling leaves that look like little tubes can mean heat stress, or it can mean uneven water. Check your soil moisture before you panic. Now let me share a few patterns I see in almost every garden I visit, because these are the conventional habits that the better approach quietly fixes. The first pattern is the daily evening sprinkle. Folks come home from work, grab the hose, and give every plant a quick drink. It feels caring, but it is keeping roots shallow and creating that wet-dry swing we talked about. The fix is to water deeply 2 or 3 times a week instead and trust that the plant has reserves between drinks. The second pattern is overhead watering with a sprinkler or a wand spray. The leaves get drenched, the fruit gets wet, and within a few weeks, every fungal disease in the neighborhood has set up shop. The fix is to keep water at the soil line every single time. If you already have a sprinkler system, run it in the early morning so leaves dry fast, but a soaker hose is a much better long-term answer. The third pattern is watering on a fixed schedule no matter what. Tuesday and Friday, rain or shine. The trouble is, your tomato does not check a calendar. It responds to soil moisture and weather. The fix is the finger test. Use the schedule as a reminder, but let the soil decide. The fourth pattern is panicking after a dry spell and absolutely drenching the plant. That sudden gulp after several dry days is exactly what causes cracking and blossom end rot. The fix is consistency. If you fall behind, water deeply but not desperately, and get back on rhythm. I did every one of these myself for years. None of it makes you a bad gardener. It just means nobody told you the deeper logic of how a tomato actually drinks. Now for the bonus I promised you at the start, and this is the trick that I think is going to change your watering game more than anything else. It is called the buried bottle method, and an old market gardener showed it to me probably 12 years ago. Take an empty 1-gallon plastic jug, like a milk jug or a vinegar jug. Drill or poke 6 to 8 small holes, about the size of a pencil tip, all around the bottom third of the jug. Bury the jug right next to your tomato plant, about 6 to 8 inches away from the main stem, with the neck and cap sticking out about an inch above the soil. Leave the cap off or loose. Now, whenever you water, instead of running the hose at the base of the plant, you fill that jug. The water seeps out through those holes slowly over several hours and goes directly to the deep root zone, exactly where the plant wants it. No evaporation, no runoff, no wet leaves. You can fill a jug in 30 seconds and walk away. I run 2 jugs per plant for the big indeterminates like Brandywine and Cherokee Purple, and 1 jug per plant for determinates and patio types. The first season I tried this, I cut my watering time roughly in half and saw fewer cracked fruit, almost no blossom end rot, and noticeably bigger plants by August. It is also a wonderful way to reuse a piece of plastic that would otherwise hit the recycling bin or the trash. That is the kind of small, thoughtful, low-cost trick that adds up over a season. If you have made it this far, I want to thank you for taking the time, and I want to invite you to take this one step further. Everything I shared today is the kind of practical, hands-on knowledge I've packed into the 30-day kitchen scrap garden protocol. Inside the book, you will find the full 31 crops you can regrow from kitchen scraps, the $10 starter kit guide, so you do not waste a penny on equipment, complete zero-waste kitchen strategies, and the full troubleshooting section that covers watering, light, pests, and timing. It is 171 pages of real, tested guidance for $17. You can grab it by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the link below in the description. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you left a comment letting me know what tomato troubles you have been wrestling with, and please share this with a fellow gardener who might be losing their harvest to the very mistake we just covered. So if you take just one thing away today, let it be this: water your tomatoes like the deep-rooted plants they actually are. Soak them well, mulch them deeply, watch them closely, and trust the rhythm. That 90-pound harvest I told you about at the start was not luck, and it was not a special variety. It was just the right water, at the right depth, on the right schedule. I would love to hear how your plants respond when you try it. Until next time, keep growing.